Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America. As you can see, I'm not Chris again. I'm Jack Fairchild, his co-host, filling in for him today. Chris is away working today. Hopefully, we'll have him back next week, but just we kind of knew this was probably going to happen this week, but we weren't 100%. That's why we didn't ready anybody for it last week. But we are excited to be here again, bring you another episode, and seems like there's always something crazy going on that we're going to be discussing, and this seems very timely for us, especially considering our own redistricting battle that we just went through here in Mississippi. When you know the story, we've talked about it, and we saw it cost a sitting state senator her position because she voted for some weaponized redistricting. But now I want to talk about what's going on in Texas and a response from several states away. And what are we seeing here? What is happening with this whole redistricting deal? And again, that's something I want to get into because, again, in Texas, we are seeing where they're trying to draw new congressional districts. They're saying that these new districts are going to hand them 5 more Republican seats in the House of Representatives. Again, it seems like this is part of the plan. I have not looked at the lines. I'm okay with any lines that make more geographical sense than what we typically see when we see new drawn maps, new drawn lines. If you go look at most of them, you'll see that they're drawn all over the place. I haven't looked at Texas's line, so I can't tell you that they're more geographically pleasing or not. But I do know that they would, in theory, present them with 5 more Republican seats in the House of Representatives. And of course, they've been met with backlash. They've seen Democrats run away from the Capitol. They're not going to be there to vote, so therefore there won't be a quorum, so they won't be able to hold a vote for it. And that's been their whole plan, which we'll get to that in a second because that's a ridiculous way to handle this. So we'll come back to that in a second. But predictably, outside of the insane Democrats who aren't doing their job up there by showing up to work, you've seen Democrats and liberals all over the country railroading against Texas over these new district lines. You see, the governor of Illinois was one of those being very critical. But what's crazy about that is when you go and you look at the district map up there in Illinois, you see lines drawn like this. And I mean, there's no geographical sense. It's clearly done in an effort to make sure that the Democrats hold on to as many seats up there as possible. They're actively trying to draw those lines in a way that makes sure that Democrats maintain power. It's something that has gone on forever. This is not a new thing. We can talk about whether or not it's something that should happen or not, but that's part of what happens when these lines get redrawn. The party that's in power of that state typically tries to make sure that they maintain power, that they grow power if they can. Right or wrong, we can have that discussion another day, but that's the way it has always been. And now all of a sudden the Democrats act like this is not something they've ever heard of. They've never seen this before. It's the worst thing ever. So of course the Democrats, they react in typical fashion, as I said. They took off and ran from the Capitol because, again, their whole goal here was to try to prevent a vote from being allowed in the first place. You had this crazy lunatic up there in Texas, Beto O'Rourke, who's launched a couple of failed campaigns himself. He was actually trying to finance these Democrats leaving the state to avoid the vote. Of course, a judge struck down his plan to finance their ability to escape by telling them that they cannot, he cannot help fund that. So we have seen that happen. But as we watch this entire thing play out, we're seeing something really interesting. Because again, you're seeing a lot of hypocrites on the Democrat side. They don't like it because they're losing numbers. They don't like it because it doesn't work for them. Well, of course, that leads us to everybody's favorite little weak-kneed, terrible governor, Gavin Newsom there in California. You know Gavin, he's the guy that wants to be president but can't win debates when he's put on national television. He's the guy that says he wants to be the leader of the free world, but meanwhile, California's a dumpster fire. That Gavin Newsom, the guy that has a terrible economy, is forever asking for help, except for when it comes to stemming illegal aliens, because he doesn't want you to come in and touch the illegal immigrants in this country. You need to steer clear of him then. But oh yeah, if you want to give him federal dollars, he'll take that. Take that. Gavin Newsom, of course, he is already talking about trying to counter what Texas is trying to do and redraw maps in California to offset, as he refers to it, rigging of maps in red states. Now, I don't know if he can do this, if they've already voted on the lines, because normally, at least in the state of Mississippi, our districts are drawn up in census years. So after the census is done, based on the population, we have to redraw the district lines. Maybe you saw a population shift out of this district into this district. So maybe you have to redraw to make sure that the districts are better proportioned when it comes to population. I don't know for sure if that's a federal law and how they do it, or if the states get to decide on their own. My guess is it's probably a federal law, but I don't 100% know that. So now, if they've already drawn the lines, does he have a legal precedent to redraw them again if they just instituted new lines 2 years ago? That I don't know. It's an interesting argument. But he says that he wants to, again, blame Trump and says that they are going to push for this and try to see if they can draw some redistricting. Newsom, of course, he says that Trump missed a deadline to stand down on his push to redistrict in Texas. And he released a tweet in which his office said Donald Taco Trump, as many called him, missed the deadline. California will now draw new, more beautiful maps. They will be historic as they will end the Trump presidency. Dems take back the House. That's something that Newsom wrote earlier this week in a social media post by his press office, which was meant to mock, of course, how Trump speaks a lot of times. He went on to say, big press conference this week with powerful Dems, Gavin Newsom, your favorite governor. That will be devastating for Magna. Thank you for your attention to this matter, he said. So the Republicans, of course, in Texas, they continue to push to draw. This is something that's happening at Trump's urging, and it's part of a broader effort by the GOP to pad their razor-thin House numbers, which, again, you see this happen all the time in states. So Gavin Newsom wants to answer it with his own redrawn, reconfigured district lines. Folks, this type of nonsense is one of those things where all that's going to happen is the American people are going to get more and more frustrated. And Gavin Newsom's got so many more issues that he really needs to be focused on and maybe not be jumping in Texas's own redistricting battle. Maybe he shouldn't be widening into this when his state is struggling at the historic levels that it is. But instead, Gavin wants to get in this pissing match with Donald Trump, and that's what it is. He doesn't care about what Texas is doing. He cares that Trump's involved. And his Trump derangement syndrome's kicking overdrive because he wants to ensure that Donald Trump looks bad. He wants to ensure that Democrats can take back the House. This is political gamesmanship at its finest. And at some point, we have to try to figure out how to lock district lines in for the 10-year period that they are done. I know here in Mississippi, the courts forced them to redraw them again. That's why we had to face redistricting in our state. Now, it did not affect the federal lines. It only affected the state lines. Federal districts did not change in our state. So it was a different scenario for sure. But as we're watching this battle unfold, are we truly, again, I understand why Texas wants to, and I understand why Trump wants to do it. But is it a dangerous game if the Democrat-controlled states like California can just offset it? Is it a game worth playing if they can just turn around and draw these lines the way they do? I don't know. It's an interesting question, and it's a fascinating battle to watch. Now, back to Texas, where you had a lot of these Democrats decide, you know what? I don't like what y'all are doing, so we're just going to take our ball and go home. That's essentially what they did here, where they just decided, we know we can't win the vote. So we're just going to prevent the vote from happening by leaving. It's crazy. When you sit here and you watch this, and you see exactly how they're pushing this further and further into an act of where they're not doing their jobs. That's the simplest way to put it. They're not doing their jobs. Instead of showing up and trying to argue their point, see if maybe they can get more votes on their side, they're struggling. They're struggling because they know they can't win that fight. So they just jump on a plane and leave. They just jump on a plane and leave their job, ignore their duty. The people of Texas elected you to go there and do a job. You know what would happen to me if I just decided I wasn't going to show up anymore? Or decided, you know what, I disagree with one of the policies put in place, and I decided to leave. Do you think I'm going to still have my job? Well, the answer is absolutely not. They're not going to keep you around if you never show up. That's terrible business. But in politics, apparently, you can just not show up, and you'll be called heroic for what you're trying to do. It's not heroic. There's nothing heroic about it. We're going to have to sit back and see how this whole thing plays out. But, I think Texas has the numbers for sure to pass this if that's what they want. Again, if you elected to go to Congress, go to the capital of whatever your state, and you're just not showing up because you want to try to prevent them from having a quorum to be able to put the vote through in the first place, you are neglecting your duty. Don't these people take an oath when they're sworn into this office? Aren't they required to perform the job? But yet, when they're faced with it, and they know that they're on the losing side of this vote, they just run and hide because they see that that's a way that they could potentially prevent the vote from happening. It's crazy. Well, speaking of former Texas Representative Beto O'Rourke, he's in the news also for some of his attacks on Donald Trump. He remarked he didn't know how the history books, I can only imagine the history books that will be written of the people of 2025. And then he likened it to 1933 Germany. That's right. He was on, imagine that, Gavin Newsom's podcast, which I'm sure is very, very highly viewed. On that show, he was talking about different things, and O'Rourke, of course, he attacked Trump for what they're trying to do in Texas, and he applauded the Democrats of Texas, calling them some of the very last lines of defense of democracy. Always with this defense of democracy, even though we're a republic, but by contrast, he predicted Republicans, and by extension, the Trump administration, would be remembered similarly to the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany. Because again, that seems to be their tired trope. When we can't truly debate you, we'll just call you a Nazi and scream about it a little bit, and then whenever that happens, we'll just move on. His exact quote says, "I can only imagine the history books written 100 years from now looking at the people of 2025. It's the way, you and I, when we were in school, we're looking at people in Germany in 1933. That guy's named chancellor in January of that year. In 53 days, he has destroyed German democracy." So I guess he's saying that Trump's going to destroy the American democracy. I mean, again, we've heard that before. Didn't Trump serve as president for 4 years before now? And don't we still have our government still in place? All these predictions, all this nonsense that you threw out, it didn't happen the first time. But now he's going to do it. Now he's really going to do it. We should just, sure. He continued to say, he said the Parliament or Congress, their legislature, passed these enabling laws just like the Republicans are doing in Congress today that said anything you want, you go out and do it. And he goes from being this buffoonish, clownish thug who can barely hold power to an undisputed master and dictator of the German people. And I know this doesn't repeat, but it sure as hell rhymes, he says. Of course, O'Rourke is no stranger to trying to compare Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler because, again, that seems to be just one of the most standard Democrat talking points of all time. It's crazy because, again, this is a trick that hasn't worked. They've thrown it out time and time again. It's never truly worked. It's never worked, and most people are sick and tired of this whole Nazi comparison nonsense that constantly gets thrown out. Let me be clear. There's no comparison to Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler. It's a ridiculous statement. But before it was Donald Trump, it was George W. Bush was a Nazi. Before George W. Bush, it was his dad was a Nazi. Before that, Ronald Reagan was a Nazi. It's just their talking point. It's all they know. It's like they're a bunch of parrots just repeating what the last people said before them. That's all they know how to do. They call people fascist without even fully understanding what fascism is. And if they looked in the mirror, they would see what a fascist looks like. It's their side that tries to stifle free speech, tries to push back against any voice that disagrees with them. The left loves to preach to us that we need to be more tolerant, that we need to be more accepting and understanding. But then you give them a counter viewpoint to whatever opinion they're trying to split out, and here comes the name calling. Here comes the attacks. Oh, you only think that way because you're a Nazi. It's so laughable, and it's a reason why they have failed so much in recent years. Look, they thought that getting Donald Trump back on the ballot again was going to be a slam dunk for them. They were so confident that Trump couldn't win that they ran a guy that was suffering from dementia, allegedly. And then when he got exposed to not being mentally prepared to run the country for the next 4 years, they replaced him with a laughing idiot. And that's the truth. I mean, I'm sorry. I know there are people out there that you can't say that. That's too mean. I watched the interviews. I saw her failings time and time again. Kamala Harris had no business being the Democrat nominee. She had no business being the vice president of the United States. And she definitely has no business ever being considered to be the president of the United States. She couldn't give coherent interviews. She was not ready for that stage. But yet, they propped her up to that stage because they had to do something. Here's a little secret for some of you guys. And I know we've said this before on the show, but depending on new viewers, new listeners we might have, the only reason when they got Joe Biden to step down that they went to Kamala Harris was because they didn't have to give back all the campaign funds. They didn't have to start over from scratch. Because her name was on the ticket, they were able to keep those donations and move forward. That's why. It wasn't because they thought she was going to be the one to win. It wasn't because they believed in her. They knew she was a liability. The Democrats had been talking about ways to get her off the ticket before Biden ran for re-election. Didn't happen, but they talked about it. And if they had those strong discussions about it, that tells you they never wanted her to be anywhere close to the White House because they saw what a liability she was. But meanwhile, Democrats continue to anytime you disagree with them, it has to be a ism, a phobia, whatever. You didn't like Kamala Harris? It's because you're a sexist. It's probably also because you're racist too. American people have been rejecting that for some time. And this constant decision to label anyone that disagrees with the Democrat point of view as a Nazi is getting old. It's extremely frustrating for sure. And it's insane that that's the way that they view things, that they think that this old, lame, tired school of insults is going to somehow magically work this time. That somehow this time we're going to be, I want to be called a Nazi. So I'm going to go vote for their candidate. Sorry, doesn't work that way. But the bottom line here is that maybe folks like Beto, a guy who shouldn't even be in politics anymore. I mean, a guy who has been exposed for a fraud time and time again is still up here trying to soak up the headlines, trying to make himself relevant with his attacks on Donald Trump. Democrats still don't understand that Trump won and that he's popular. The other day, CNN had a headline, and the headline was, Trump's support is finally waning, but slowly. And if you went in and you examine the article, it doesn't really show you that anything is waning. And I don't think his support is waning at all. I think his supporters are still right there with him. Has he had a blunder or two? Sure, but the economy seems to be improving and there seems to be good stuff on the horizon for him. But you listen to the Democrats and it's like, oh, he's finally going to be unpopular. He's finally going to start to fade away. But is that truly the case? Is that truly what's happening here? I can't say that it is. I can't say that that's actually what's happening because I just don't see it the same way that they do. They want you to believe that. They want you to fully accept that they're push to try to discredit Trump, to discredit the things his administration have done. A lot of us were already tired of this nonstop assault that didn't allow us to try to come together as a nation. They told us after the first assassination attempt of Donald Trump during the campaign that we would tone down the rhetoric. Simple question for you guys. Do you think the rhetoric's been toned down? It's an honest question. You can answer it. Do you think the rhetoric has been toned down in the slightest? Do you think that we have stopped being inflammatory? And when I say we, I mean the left. Because I don't see it, people. I witness the way that they send private messages to us. And they hadn't toned any of that down. Their hatred is very much real. But that's who we're dealing with. That's who we're fighting against. That's who we're battling these days, people. I think it's time for a quick commercial break right here. So we're going to pause right here and we'll be right back.
Resort. Resort.
Welcome back here to the program, folks. We're getting a little fired up. And I think it's justifiable to be a little fired up because when we look at the way that we've been treated, the way that the left is constantly in our business, this whole battle over Texas, this whole battle, it's fascinating to watch. This whole accusation of being a Nazi is so laughable because, again, if you actually understand anything about conservatism, you know that it's the farthest thing from being a Nazi because we want you to be free. We want you to live your life. Yes, there are laws in place. That's part of the reason why illegal immigration has to be enforced. But we want you as a citizen to enjoy as much freedom as you can have. Now, go to the other side of the equation and ask yourself, who's the one that's trying to oppress your freedom? Who's the one that is trying to tell you you can't say certain things, can't do certain things? It's the left. It's always been their side. It's the truth. They just don't like it when you point it out for them. Because, again, it kills their narrative. And it's one of the biggest truths out there these days. Now, let's flip gears real quick, because as we're watching political races, there's one race in particular that has a lot of eyes on it, and that is this mayor's race up in New York. And part of the reason why it's drawing so much attention is because a devout socialist is the front runner. There's been people trying to convince some of his opponents to step down from office, or from running, so that way maybe Mamdani has a harder path. Because if you've got, look, here's a dirty secret for you, those of you that don't understand elections. If you've got a race and you've got, 5, 10, 15 people in it, it makes it easier for somebody to win, especially if there's no runoff. It makes it easier for them to just sneak right in and take that position. It might not even be the most popular person. There was a race here locally not long ago, and it had multiple people in it, and the person that won it, I think, won with only 23% of the vote or something like that. So that meant almost over 70% of the county votes against you. The city votes against you, but you still win because there are just so many other choices to choose from. It's one of those things that the Democrats are hoping to exploit, or the socialists. And there's been a lot of conversations about this, Zohran Mamdani and his, again, we've gone over his beliefs and his flawed belief of government. But one of the questions that people have been asking is, who is behind his campaign? Well, now we're finding out that a former top executive for liberal billionaire George Soros's Open Society Foundations, he is one of the ones who has an involvement in Mamdani's New York mayoral campaign, and this connects him back directly to Barack Obama. Patrick Gaspard, who served in several high-profile political positions, including advising former President Barack Obama's historic 2008 campaign, serving as a Democrat National Committee executive director, and being tapped as the Center of America's Progress president in 2021, has been informally advising Mamdani on the same side, and recently introduced Obama campaign architect David Axelrod to him. This all is coming out thanks to a New York Times article. A New York Times opinion piece that was published on Wednesday explained how Obama world operatives were starting to get involved with the Mamdani campaign and have been in communication with his campaign behind the scenes. Obama reportedly called Mamdani after his Democrat primary victory in June, offering advice about the importance of governing and giving constituents optimism in dark times. Gaspard, who was reportedly at Mamdani's victory party in June, has played a growing advising role in Mamdani's campaign and accompanying him to meetings. He also introduced Axelrod to him, as we mentioned last month. So again, we've talked about it for a long time. Barack Obama, many of us knew Barack Obama was truly a socialist. Now, he tried to pretend he wasn't. He tried to hide that fact from people, but you saw in the way he governed. They believed in fundamentally transforming America, not upholding the traditions and the values that made this country great in the first place. They wanted to fundamentally change it. This is a vessel for that. Barack Obama might not be able to run again, but the fact that he's involved in getting behind a candidate as radical as Mamdani tells you this man was extremely radical. It's the truth, people, and we're seeing it. I know there's some folks, there's probably a liberal out there watching this going, oh, well, you just called them socialist, and you get mad when people call you Nazi. Well, because one fits. Mamdani even admits to being a socialist. And when you call them that, you look at their policies, and their policies are socialist policies. It's crazy as we're watching this. Mamdani campaign has been giving millions to a media strategist who had ties to the Obamas. Barack Obama is 100% involved in this campaign. And you're seeing firsthand the true side of Barack Obama, the side that many of us had warned you about, many of us had told you existed. They told you that they were. They told you they were socialists without saying it out front. Now, Mamdani tells you it straight up out front. This idea that the country needs to be torn down and started over from scratch is insane, because it doesn't. We need to be fighting for our nation. Now, some of you may be watching this and being like, why do you care about a mayoral election in New York? Think about it, folks. You probably can't even name the mayor of your own town, but you can name the mayor of New York, or you can at least name several of them. Whether it's Ed Koch, Rudy, Gianna, you can name them. You can look at that. You can see multiple mayors of New York that you can name throughout history. Now, meanwhile, go name 3 mayors of your own city, and you're probably going to struggle. The reason is because New York is high profile. It's a high profile city that is constantly in the news. You would argue that maybe as an overhyped city, that's a debate for another day. But it's constantly in the news. So you know who the mayor there is because you see it on your nightly news. You see him in front of cameras. You hear him talking constantly. Because it's a high profile position, one that gets you national attention, that means it could also elevate you to a higher office. You become the mayor of New York. Well, you might be governor of New York. Or you might become a U.S. senator from New York. Elevate that profile even further, and you know what? You might become president of the United States. That's why they're betting all their chips on this socialist dream of a candidate that they have in Mamdani. That's the reason why Obama is heavily involved, because, again, his vision of America is more of a socialist nation. This guy they view as a tool that they can utilize to get there. That's why he's dangerous. His positions, we've gone over them on this very show, so you can go back and watch a previous episode. You can see government-run grocery stores. Things that just would not work. But those are the things he's pushing because, again, he is a true die-in-the-wool socialist. And now you know who his backer is. He's probably going to win that office. And our only hope then is that he tanks New York's economy so bad. But again, going back to the first segment, Gavin Newsom has tanked California's economy, and yet here this guy is still a front runner for the Democrat nominee. So does what he actually does while he's in office, does it matter? Should. I mean, your record should be greater than your rhetoric, but we see time and time again that we look past that. We look at somebody and be like, well, that guy looks presidential. We go and hear about his policies, and they sound anything but presidential, but we give that a free pass. It's frustrating, people, because, again, there's so much more that we could do to try to improve this country, and trying to improve the country is not giving it over to socialists. Do I think that if he wins the mayor's office, that means he's well on his way to becoming a national figure and possibly president of the United States? Yes. I think that's why Barack Obama and the Democrats are invested for this guy, because he matches their vision. And they understand that if he can get in that high-profile office, he'll be on national news regularly, because we Everything's based. Almost every news agency is based out of New York. The ones that aren't are out there in Los Angeles. There's a reason for that. They prop up that city. And don't get me wrong, it's a massive city. I visited it one time. I enjoyed it. I like New York. But it doesn't speak for all of America the way that they want it to. But they try to make it the center of all attention. That's why being elected the mayor of New York City is not like being elected the mayor of So-So, Mississippi. It's not the same thing because, again, one is a smaller rural community. The other is a massive city known worldwide, not just nationwide, but worldwide. It's launched political careers for multiple folks who've held that office that went on to try to have success in a higher office. It's no guarantee that they're going to win because, again, we've seen former New York mayors try to go for those higher offices and not be successful. But anytime you see one of the biggest cities in our country being grabbed by socialist control, that's a problem. Maybe it might be the best thing in the world if he does go ahead and win and we can let New York crash and burn, but there's so much that New York adds to the economy. That's why we don't want to see that happen either. It would have a devastating effect for all of us, and that's why we're just not fans of that happening. Now, moving on, I don't know how much you folks have paid attention to this brawl or this attack. I think it's better to call it attack. I wouldn't call it a brawl that happened in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's one that's drawn straight down the racial lines. It's one that has gone down this racial path because it was a group of African Americans caught on video beating the tar out of some white folks. Of course, you knew what was going to happen the second you saw it and you saw arrests made. The excuse was going to be made that they hollered racial slurs at them and that the white people were racist and that's why they deserved the beatdown. If you've watched the video, if you've seen the assault, nothing they could have said would have warranted what happened. Nothing they could have said, no words, nothing could have warranted what happened. If you want to fight them, it's immature, it's childish, but sure, fight. They didn't just fight them. There were multiple individuals who all got involved in the assault. And then, after they beat the hell out of him, they then started to kick him when he was trying to get up. It was insane to sit there and watch because you saw firsthand how this played out. And whatever prompted it, it was probably prompted by stupidity while drunk is probably what truly caused it. But it doesn't matter. If you want people to move past certain tropes or stereotypes, then guess what? You have to sometimes just ignore stupidity. If they threw a racial slur at you, ignore it, walk away. It's not that hard. And if it triggers that much of a response out of you, that's a problem you have. I hate to say that. And if they didn't and you just did that on your own, then you deserve whatever is coming your way in the legal system. But part of the problem is we're seeing this racial divide once again. People can't see past race. Well, I'm a black person, so therefore the fact that the people that have been arrested and that did the beating are black, then I have to be on their side. I'm a white person, I have to be on their. That's not it at all. It shouldn't be that way. For me, it's not. I've seen the video. I've seen the evidence that is right in front of my eyes, and there's nothing they could have done to warrant that kind of beatdown. Nothing. If you want to sit here and try to pretend that being called a name, being called a word is enough to trigger or to excuse you for going to such violent extremes, I'm sorry, but that's not the way it should work. And as we're watching this entire case unfold and watching folks online just continue to be overly defensive, and their only defense is because they're the same color as the people being accused. They've seen the same videos we've seen, but they can't see past their race. That's a problem. I don't care what race they are. It would have been horrible if it were the other way. And I'd say it out loud. Why won't they? Perfect example is, of course, I work here for our local newspaper, the Laurel Leader Call, and we'll do a story, and it's just a straight news story. It'll be about somebody being arrested. Maybe it was for murder, maybe it was for assault. And you can go down the racial lines and find, well, y'all shouldn't be talking about that. Well, he's innocent anyway. Well, do you know that? He might be. Hasn't been a trial yet, but we still have to report the arrest. We still have to report those things, but they'll draw that line. And it's frustrating because, again, how do we come together? How do we coexist if we're constantly, always just going straight down a racial line? We should be past that. It felt like we were several years ago. Barack Obama gets elected president of the United States as the first black man to be elected to the president of the United States. That should have signified that we've moved past, no matter what you think of Barack Obama as a politician, where he stands on stuff, that should have been a sign that we've moved past that. Instead, it feels like it's gotten worse. It feels like it's gotten worse since he was elected, and I don't think it's because of people that just dislike Obama. I think it's because that liberal side felt emboldened and started to push even more of this racial narrative. Most Americans, black, white, Asian, doesn't matter. They just want to be left alone. They just want to live their life. They'll admit who's a criminal and who's not. But why is it we jump on social media and when we see evidence like what we see in Cincinnati, we can't look past race? We just can't. We gotta improve on that. 100%. We have to stop instantly going, well, he's my race, so therefore I have to defend him. And I hate to say it, I don't see it as much on one side of the spectrum. It seems to be more that black people just decide that they're going to side with the accused black person. Maybe some of that's because of injustices of the past or whatever the case. But the way we are now, we need to be asking for justice, period. And when we see overwhelming evidence, like what we've seen in these assaults in Cincinnati, then I think that we should be all okay in saying that they deserve high bonds. They deserve to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I hope they're convicted. And if their defense is they were called a name, that is stupid, nonsensical, and any defense attorney that tries to take that before a judge should be disbarred. I'm sorry if that's too harsh, but I'm over that crap. It shouldn't be a get out of jail free card just every time that somebody plays that. It shouldn't be. The same way if it was the shoe was on the other foot, I'd be saying the exact same thing. Because I don't care what race you are. If you're going to beat folks almost to death for whatever the reason, you should be ready to pay the ultimate price. If you're willing to jump in on a beatdown of somebody, you should be willing to pay the ultimate price. If you're still punching a man who can barely stand up because you've already beat him that senseless, then you should be willing to pay the price. That's what needs to happen. Is that too much to ask? I mean, is it really too much to ask that we be honest about things? That we look at evidence and look past the color of the skin of those that we're being asked to judge? Is that too much to ask? I don't think it is. I think this country should be better than where we're at today. And again, I think you can trace it back to Barack Obama because, again, he wanted to radicalize. He wanted to utilize a lot of this racial tension to his advantage, even though his win should have just proven that we've moved past that in the first place. Before we get out of here, I know we've only got, about 5 minutes or so left. And this is one I want to save mainly for Chris because I think he would be better to speak on it. But I was doing show prep today and I came across a column written by Sid Salter. Sid Salter, a employee of the state, who is constantly defending the status quo and every politician he can. He wrote a column in which he says term limits, still a tired gimmick, still disempowers voters, still weakens Mississippi, which is just from its headline is an idiotic statement in and of itself. A tired gimmick. It's not a tired gimmick, Sid. It is something we should want. But instead, you want to throw out your tired gimmick, which is you getting paid by the state, while you're also allowed to be a statewide columnist. It's still disapproved by the voters, is it? He cited 2 elections in the 90s, but you know what, Sid? It didn't stop you from jumping on board with wanting to change the Mississippi state flag when the flag was voted on by the Mississippi voters. But I guess that's a different topic. People can evolve and change, and then this whole argument that it still weakens Mississippi. I don't see that. I don't see it weakening Mississippi, especially if instead of sending folks to Washington or to Jackson and allowing them to get richer and richer off of my backs, if it means bringing them home and getting new blood in, no, it's not making Mississippi weaker. It's making us better. It's making us stronger. Because right now, we just have too many politicians go up there. And yes, Sid, there are a lot of Mississippians that don't study to figure out who to vote for. They just go with the name they recognize. But again, he wants to sit down and try to pretend that his position of being anti-term limits is for anything other than the fact he's trying to protect his friends in Jackson, his friends in D.C., the people who probably helped him get his nice, cushy state job at a public university. He wants to try to continue down that path because that's who he is. That's who he's always been. Sid tries to pretend that he's somehow a conservative when he's not. He never has been. At best, he's a moderate. He's never been a conservative, but there are people that believe him to be just that. He has never been a conservative. But he wants to argue against term limits, and he wants to use lame gimmick arguments while labeling term limits a gimmick. Term limits aren't a gimmick. I can assure you this, the founders never intended for people to go to Washington and create careers for themselves where they get richer as a result. They never intended for that to be what happened. But here we are. Any argument against term limits is always going to be the same tired stick that Sid is putting out in this column. I highly recommend you don't go view it. I highly recommend you just ignore this sad clown who, for whatever reason, still gets to put his mugshot on a weekly column, and there's still publications that enjoy running his nonsense. Quite frankly, I felt dumber after having read it because it just was not a good argument, and I knew where it was coming from. One thing that's always going to be consistent with this guy, he's always going to take up for the status quo, the establishment individuals, because that's just who he is at his core. This has been Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home for the anti-establishment movement. I'm Jack Fairchilds, filling in for Chris McDaniel this week. Chris hopes to be back with us next week, but of course, his up and down schedule, we can never guarantee it. If he's not, I promise to get Jim in with me next week, so that way you won't have to stare at me the entire time, and we can at least have a two-man show again. And then I maybe won't struggle as much as well next week, because I think you can hear I'm trying to lose my voice, so that's always fun to get through a show where your volume's going lower and lower, and not because the producer's turning it down. Anyway, we'll see you guys again next week.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.